Hello, this is Mr. Chabry, and I've got another battle video for you. So this is Brandon, his Twitch name is Pokemon Nerd, and he's got a pretty interesting team. He's got the Toucannon, he's got Incineroar. Incineroar is a Pokemon that I really like. He also has the Toxapex and the Snorlax, and if you know a thing about Snorlax, it can be a big problem if you don't have something to take it out. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and lead off with my Claydol, as my opponent actually leads with the Toxapex. And I know Claydol does not have the best matchup against Toxapex, but I think after a light screen, I should be able to live a Scald from this thing. So that's what I'm going to do the first turn, is just set up the light screen. I know Toxapex does not have the best special attack. They're usually more bulky, but looking at that, I live that very well. I am burnt, unfortunately, and that's going to hamper me a little bit, but at least I'd rather be burnt than toxic poisoned here. So now my opponent's going to switch out, knowing that I could easily go for an Earth Power. I'm just going to set up Stealth Rocks. Dragonite coming in here is a pretty good switch in. That means it can come in without taking any Stealth Rock damage, so it is at its multi-scale. Plus, even if I went for Earth Power, Dragonite is immune to Ground-type moves. So I'm just going to go ahead and switch into my Doublade. I know my opponent's probably going to set up a Dragon Dance, and what I'd like to do is, I've got Gyro Ball on this Doublade, so with the Speed Boost, I will be able to go ahead and use Gyro Ball, and that will do more damage to Dragonite. So my opponent's actually going to set up another Dragon Dance, and that's really good for me because I could just go for the Gyro Ball, and this will do a lot of damage, even with the multi-scale, to this Dragonite. Unfortunately, we're going to take a Fire Punch, but this Doublade has really nice bulk. This is a +2 Dragonite, and it just took that. So Doublade is actually a really good Pokemon. It has really nice bulk. It's very, very good. It's a Pokemon that you don't really think much of when you think of really good, bulky Pokemon. But, yeah, so Incineroar is going to come back in. I know Incineroar will be able to take out my Doublade, and I would like to keep Doublade alive. So what I'm going to do is sack off my Claydol. I don't know what this Incineroar wants to go for, so if I went into Typhlosion, I might take a Darkest Lariat, and my opponent does go for Darkest Lariat. So now what I'm going to do is go into Chestnut here. I'm going to Scout right now. I do have Spiky Shield on Chestnut, so I can use this as an opportunity to scout out, see if my opponent is choiced, maybe, and my opponent goes for the Flare Blitz. So this is really good for me because I know it's not Choice Scarfed, and I doubt my opponent's going to go for the Darkest Lariat here, so I'm just going to bring in my Typhlosion. And Typhlosion will take this Flare Blitz and get a Flash Fire boost. So right now Typhlosion is in a very good position. Unfortunately, my light screen is now gone, but I mean that's okay because now my Typhlosion can basically take out this Incineroar. And instead of going for Hidden Power Rock, what I want it to do is just try to hit this thing as hard as I can. I'm not sure if Hidden Power Rock would do it, but I'm just going to go for the Infernal Overdrive. I'm pretty sure that this will take out the Incineroar, and as you see, it does take out the Incineroar. The reason I did not go for Hidden Power Rock there was because I was pretty sure that Infernal Overdrive would do more damage. I know a lot of Incineroars are actually Assault Vested, so I'm just going to do that. Here I'm going to see how much Hidden Power Rock does, and it doesn't quite do enough. So unfortunately, Typhlosion is going to go down to this Rock Blast. So now, unfortunately, my Typhlosion is gone, but now I'm going to have to switch into something to take care of this Toucannon. And what I'm going to switch into is my own bird. So this is my Honchkrow. It's a Pokemon that I've really been wanting to try out lately. It's a really good Pokemon, and this one is actually Choice Banded. So this Choice Banded Sucker Punch is going to do a lot of damage to anything. Plus, this thing also has Moxie. So it's going to get an attack boost every time it knocks something out. And now my opponent's going to bring in Gengar, and I'm not totally sure why, because Gengar does not have the best physical defense, and it's weak to dark. So maybe my opponent brought it in hoping for the Cursed Body, knowing that maybe my Honchkrow was Choice Banded, but I mean, still, there goes the Gengar, and Gengar is a really good Pokemon, so I'm kind of confused why my opponent let their own Gengar go down there. So now Toxapex is coming in, and since I have been disabled from using Sucker Punch and I'm Choice Banded into it, there's not much of a reason for me to let my Honchkrow take unnecessary damage. So I'm going to bring in my Jellicent, expecting the Scald, and the Toxapex does go for Scald. So Jellicent has the Water Absorb, so it's not going to take any damage from Water-type moves. So now my opponent's going to use this as an opportunity to set up Toxic Spikes, knowing that there's not much my Jellicent can do back to this Toxapex. This is a Toxic Hex Jellicent, and yeah, I can't poison this thing. So I'm going to go into Chestnut now. That way I will just be poisoned instead of Toxic Poison from these spikes, as my opponent actually brings in Snorlax. So I'm okay with this because I could easily Drain Punch this thing if I wanted to, and that will do a lot of damage to Snorlax. Snorlax does not have as good as defense as it does special defense, but here I'm actually going to go ahead and Leech Seed, expecting him to switch into something else, but he actually gets the Stockpile, and my Leech Seed misses, so that is very unfortunate. This Snorlax basically got a free Stockpile, and I really want to get a Leech Seed so I can negate some of this poison damage, but unfortunately I miss, and I'm going to have to go for Leech Seed here to get some health back. I do have Drain Punch on this thing too, and that will be pretty decent against the Snorlax, but unfortunately now my opponent is at +2 defenses. So this is really not a good thing for me, because Snorlax is a very bulky Pokemon, and my Chestnut is poisoned. Luckily I'm not Toxic Poisoned, but it's still not really the best situation for me. So I've got the Leech Seed up, and I'm almost at full health from here. Unfortunately, I am going to lose a little bit to the poison, but that's okay because now I can just easily Drain Punch. And looking at that, that does not do very much. This +2 defense on the Snorlax is really helping it survive. So unfortunately, this thing has the Rocky Helmet too, so that's really not really the greatest thing for me. And I'm going to take a Body Slam. I cannot be paralyzed though, luckily, because I am poisoned. But looking at this thing's moves, it has Stockpile and Body Slam, and I'm still unsure of what its last two moves are. I know a lot of Snorlaxes actually carry Rest, and I'm kind of scared of that, because if this thing can easily rest off all of this damage that I'm putting on it, that will be very, very unfortunate. So here I'm just going to go for a Spiky Shield to put a little bit more chip damage on this thing, but unfortunately he goes for Rest here, so this is really not a good position for my Chestnut to be in. So now this thing is at full health, and even though I do have the Leech Seed, these Stockpiles are making it harder and harder for me to wear down the Snorlax. Plus, I'm being wore down a little bit faster, even though I do have Drain Punch and Leech Seed. In the long run, Snorlax is going to have an easier time healing up, unless I can get a crit, or unless I can make my opponent switch out the Snorlax. So I'm just going to go for the Drain Punch, take some Rocky Helmet damage. Luckily the Leech Seed is helping me out here. And now my opponent is going to go for Sleep Talk. And luckily for me, the Sleep Talk chooses Rest, which means it basically doesn't do anything. But seeing that Sleep Talk, it could easily get a Body Slam. It can get Stockpile from that. So it's going to be a little bit harder to face this thing. Plus, once my opponent wakes up, he can easily go for Rest once again and completely fill his health back up. So I am not in the best position, so I'm going to have to switch out my Chestnut. Seeing that my opponent only has normal type moves, however, I can easily go into Deblade. Deblade's not going to take any damage from the Snorlax, and I can just keep going for Gyro Ball, maybe stalling out a little bit longer, maybe making my opponent switch out, knowing that there's not much that Snorlax can even do to touch Deblade. So now my opponent's going to wake up and go for the Rest once again. There's not much I could do to stop that. Even if I went for Drain Punch with Chestnut, it wouldn't be enough to finish off the Snorlax. So now the Snorlax is at full health, and I just went for Pursuit just in case my opponent switched out there. But really it didn't matter that much because my opponent got all of their health back. We took some chip damage there, lowering the Snorlax's health, but not enough to make me feel better. But now my opponent switches out the Snorlax, and that's actually very good for me because now once the thing comes back out, its defense stat will be reset back to normal. And here I actually switch back into Chestnut, wanting to get some more damage on the Snorlax, but I'm okay with being in here while this Toxapex is here. If I need to, I could easily switch into Jellicent. Plus, most Toxapexes don't really carry Poison-type moves. It would be very unfortunate here because I do stay in with Chestnut. It would be very unfortunate if this Toxapex did have something like Venoshock or something like that. But luckily for me, this one ends up not having that, and it goes for Baneful Bunker. There's not much of a reason for me not to go for Leech Seed because that would be a better play. Plus, I'm already poisoned, so the Baneful Bunker isn't really going to matter to me. So now I'm going to get my Leech Seed up. That's going to give me some more survivability here. And now my opponent's going to go for the Scald, and as you're going to see, it barely does anything. The Scald doesn't do that much, really. Chestnut is just really nice and bulky, so I'm in a good position, but I don't really want to stay in on this Toxapex because most Toxapexes do have Recover. Plus, if this one does have Regenerator, all my opponent has to do is switch out, and it will be back to pretty much full health unless I can bring it lower on health. And in this situation, Chestnut's not in the best position. But what I can do is set up spikes, and that will help whittle away the health on that Snorlax if it ever comes back in. Plus, if I make my opponent switch this thing out and back in, it will take some damage too. So it would be pretty decent here. Get some spikes up. That way I can take care of the Snorlax a little bit easier. The Snorlax is still a pretty big problem for me, and I'm just going to get some more health back from Leech Seed. I mean, just enough to try to negate this poison damage. But now what I'm going to do is just set up another layer of spikes. There's not really a reason for me not to. This Toxapex clearly cannot touch me. It does get another layer of toxic spikes up, and that's very unfortunate for my Jellicent because when it comes in, it will be toxic poisoned. But everything else on my team is either Steel type or Flying type. I do have some Levitate Pokemon on my team too. But yeah, Chestnut right now is poison, and Jellicent will be toxic poisoned. But I'm actually okay with that because Jellicent can't really even touch these last two Pokemon at all. So what I'm going to do is set up my last layer of spikes. I have 3 layers of spikes here, and that will help me with the Snorlax if it comes back in. My opponent's going to go for Toxic Spikes. I'm not sure why, because there can only be 2 layers of Toxic Spikes at one time. But, I mean, maybe my opponent forgot that there was already a layer of Toxic Spikes when he brought in this thing. So now what I'm going to do, after taking some more poison damage, I'm actually going to switch out my Chestnut here. I've got 3 layers of spikes. There's not really a reason for me to stay in with my Chestnut. I can easily bring in Honchkrow and just take a lot of damage onto whatever wants to come in. My opponent goes for Scald here, maybe hoping for the burn if I do switch something in. But on Chestnut, it wouldn't do much of anything. But luckily, there's no burn on my Honchkrow. Honchkrow is in here. It is ready to try to sweep this team. So Honchkrow being Choice Banded, it's a really good Pokemon. I'm actually going to go for Brave Bird here. It's my strongest attack on this thing. I do have Foul Play. I do have Sucker Punch as you've seen earlier. And I have Brave Bird. My last move is actually Heat Wave, and that's actually there just for like Steel types, stuff like that. So now I'm going to get the nice Moxie boost, and I can easily just Brave Bird this thing. This thing is back now into its base defense, and it's not going to take a Brave Bird, not after Stealth Rocks and 3 layers of spikes. So now this Brave Bird will finish off this bulky Snorlax. So we finally finish it off. If you like this, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you in the next Pokemon battle.